Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to present you three discoveries that were found during the fresco hunting photo research expedition in Western Bulgaria, conducted between 2008 and 2019 by a group of Balkan Heritage Field School led by me, Ivan Vasilev. I'm archaeologist, Bulgarian archaeologist, and also the director of the fresco hunting research expedition. It takes place in Western Bulgarian borderlands near modern-day Serbia. What is Balkan heritage? First, in 2008 was established the Balkan Heritage Foundation, a Bulgarian non-governmental organization that is to support the preservation and study and promotion of the Balkan cultural heritage. The foundation designed two programs, one of them the Balkan Heritage Field School, an educational program for field education, and the Balkan Heritage Research Network, a platform for researchers from all over the world to study and actually conserve the Balkan cultural heritage. Fresco Hunting Photo Research Expedition is one of the major projects and the oldest project of the Balkan Heritage Foundation. It started in 2008 and combines research and education. Its goals is to actually, in partnership with New Bulgarian University and local municipalities and parishes, to explore and study the late medieval churches in Risk and their wall paintings. The major goal is to record their remains during the last 12 years. We visited more than 30 churches and created records of approximately 20 of them. All of them are in Risk, are either abandoned or ruined or half ruined or just exposed to the elements, and sometimes having wall paintings that deserve attention. During our research, we use only non-destructive methods, photography and architectural recording. The area in focus is the borderlands of two Bulgarian districts, the districts of Sofia and the districts of Sofia and Pernik. Historically and geographically speaking, this is the upper Punishavia or the upper NISHAVA region, the upper part of the NISHAVA basin, an area that is now located on the territory of Bulgaria and Serbia. For your orientation, Pirot, Serbia and Sofia, Bulgaria are located here. During this expedition that conducted the research and documentation, along with a field school for architectural and photographic documentation of cultural properties, with participation of students from all over the world. We did three very interesting discoveries. When these discoveries were first found and then recorded in the period 2010-2019. Where? First at the church of Sveti Nicola, Letni, St. Nicholas of the Summer, near the village of Golesh, the very western Bulgaria, Sofia district. At the church of Sveti Spas, St. Xavier, in the village of Vasilev, and at the church of Sisveti, All Saints, in the cemetery of the village of Golemo Malovo. All three churches are located in the borderlands of Sofia district and are dated according to the official records and scarce publications to the 19th century. What kind of discoveries we have done? First, we discovered that these churches are slightly older, a couple of centuries older than it was told, and definitely according to the structures we saw. We didn't discover physically anything, we just visited the sites and saw the remains of structures and wall paintings that certainly date to the post-medieval period. Of course, we recorded them. I will start with the first discovery, Svetý Nikola Letný, Golesh. It was considered as a monastery church, but the history of this place as a monastery dates back to the late 19th century. It was never an actual and functioning monastery, but it was called by the locals Saint Nikola Letný Monastery. The story is very interesting. We first visited the site in 2010. And I have to show you that we were quite shocked to see. We expected to see this. This is what we found on the Panoramio on Google. So these were the pictures, and according to the previous records, researchers expected to find some older frescoes maybe, but they were definitely not sure. They haven't provided any evidence about any older remains in the church of Svetý Nikola Letný, and so what you see now is a physical structure that was erected, according to them, in late 19th century. This is the condition in 2010, before 2010, but in 2010 we saw this. Shortly before our visit, the southern wall collapsed. At least the villagers said so. And they decided to enlarge the church. And what we saw was quite surprising because it definitely compromised and corrupted the original structure and potentially the original remains of walls and wall paintings. In the meantime, we visited the church several times and convinced the villagers that they should contact the relevant authorities and go back to the original design and plan of the church if they want to reconstruct it. The church was not considered as cultural property at all. And the villagers actually followed our recommendations. In 2019, this is what we saw after we visited it. So not the same, but quite close to the original volume of the building. And here is the interior. The reason why we recommended this approach and also revisited the church was a discovery of older structures that certainly date to a period before 19th century, and frescoes that certainly date to post-medieval period. They resemble the designs, they resemble the style of frescoes typical for this region, the NISHAVA region and Western Bulgaria in principle, to the period of post-Middle Ages, 15th to 17th centuries. This is the interior in 2019, and we were quite surprised because with the support of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, the villagers not only imitated the original design of the church, but also conserved the remains of frescoes inside the church. As you can see, the frescoes are located on the only original walls. Original walls of the post-medieval church are preserved up to the 2-meter height, and primarily on the northern side, the eastern side, including the apse, and the northern section of the western wall. You can see here the outer space and the frescoes with, of course, the scene Adoration of the Offering. Only the lower part of it. The next church is Svētīs St. Xavier, in the village of Vasilev. In several records, this church was mentioned, but it was published only with its original plan. It's a single nave, barrow vaulted church. The same was actually the church of Svetý Nikola Letny in Golesh. But this church had a narthex that no one noticed, recorded, or published before. According to the frescoes inside, the church dates back to the 19th century. But the narthex was covered with vegetation, and the local villagers just cleaned it for some celebrations. And we were able to take photos of the structure that showed actually evidence of architectural features, typical not for the early modern, but for more typical for the post-medieval period, like the embrasure windows, these pointed arch niches right here. And the structure was connected with the structure of the building, but it showed us that the building itself was not built on top of an older structure, but probably actually repaired it. At least the naos, at least the barrow vaulted single nave naos was reconstructed in 19th century. So this is the interior. As you can see, it's a typical naive art of the local, following the local taste in mid-19th century. But what we saw when we first visited the church in 2012 was this. Because of the humidity, the western wall, especially the dye, the lower parts of the plaster on the southern section of the western wall started falling. And this plaster dates back to the 19th century. Here, it exposed an older fresco, and we saw fragments of all these frescoes at different places of the church. Of course, the characteristics of these frescoes make us think they date back to the post-medieval period, and along with the structure of the narthex in front of the church. We believe that this is a reason to redate this ecclesiastical edifice. The third and last monument is Sisveti, or All Saints, in the village of Golemu Malovo. It's located in the cemetery. It's literally a jungle. It's different architecturally from the previous two churches. First, because it's now in the semi-ruined condition. Second, because the church consists of a narthex, obviously added later, and the three concho naos. The three concho naos that follows the designs of three concho naves here in Central Balkans. It's typical for the Central Balkan area, following the Atunid model, but more typical for the post-medieval period, because the side naves, the side conchs, don't reach the ceiling. They're lower, much lower than the ceiling. So the church looked like this when I first visited the church in 2017. And when we revisited it in 2019, this was the condition. Locals cleaned it along with some efforts to gentrify the cemetery. It was almost mission impossible, but as you can see here, there is a clear evidence about the later narthex added in the second half of 19th century to the original naos, having three conchs. Here is the southern one. You can see the point of attachment of the narthex to the naos. This obviously happened in 19th century in order to enlarge the space and satisfy the needs of the local parishes. And but nobody expected that this church, originally plastered, is so old. This is the condition in the interior. And of course, what we saw are fresco fragments that show features of post-medieval fresco painting. In brief, new data about architecture and wall paintings of 3 Bulgarian churches in Punishavie make me suggest a new date of their original construction to the post-medieval period. These are the 3 early centuries of the Ottoman, and the apogee, of course, of the Ottoman power in the Balkans. They were erected in the period when the Ohrid Archbishopric stepped out from this area that was in 1557 was covered by a new diocese of the restored Pech Patriarchy. We don't know when exactly this area returned back to the Constantinopolitan patriarchs. It may have happened in the late decades of 16th century or the early decades of 17th century. I'm not going into the details. This topic is not sufficiently explored, but the 3 churches show significant similarities with many other monuments on the territory of present-day Western Bulgaria, Southern and Eastern Serbia, or Central Balkans like North Macedonia and even Northern Greece. So, additional periods in their history can be added, and an listing of 3 monuments in the Registry of Cultural Properties of Local Significance is a very important step towards their preservation. We believe, and we suggested, conservation of older wall painting layers in Vasilev and Golesh, and detachment of the remaining wall paintings in Golemo Malovo as the sole solution for their preservation. Hvala, благодаря, thank you. Thank you to the organizers of this conference for their effort to make it happen despite the pandemic, the global pandemic, and wish success in their endeavor, as well as success to everyone participating in the conference in their future researches and studies related to Southeastern Europe. Thank you.